Okay, thank you. Well,
Recording in progress.
okay, well, I would like to call this meeting to order. And I first would like to remind you that the meeting is live streamed and video recorded for the public. So today I'm chairing the meeting, obviously, Marie is away. So moving through, with our agenda, first on my list is introduction of late items. And I wondered if anyone had any introduction of late items besides myself. um, so no one. Okay, so wanted, I would like to bring forward a motion to introduce a late item under other business, I guess. Um, and it would be to have a discussion with DAP members and city staff regarding the need to update the city's design guidelines and any other regulations that inform our review of applications. So I would need to get I believe if I'm following the right procedure, a motion to add this to the agenda and then second and then a vote. So is there any comment or before we move to motion? Yes, Tony?
Oh, just one. I'm happy to second the motion. My only concern is I have to leave as soon after 7 as I can.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that we can deal with it in a principal way rather than an exhaustive discussion at this point.
Yeah, right. I was just hoping to get sort of like initial just question and then see where we go from here.
I'll second the motion happily then.
Okay, and can I have all in favor? Okay, looks like everyone's in favor. So please correct me if I'm doing this wrong, but I believe we will add that to the as a late item to other business after we move through the two applications. Okay, thank you. So moving on to adopting the agenda. So I suppose now we have an amended agenda with that additional late item. Do I have someone to motion to adopt the agenda? Okay, thank you, Kevin. And second, Ken, thank you. Okay, and now moving on to adoption of the minutes. I did find one typo in the minutes. I don't know if anyone else has any issues. So there was one, actually it was a reference to the company I work for under right under number 2, adoption of agenda. It just says that I work for Ladder Landscape Architects and it should be Kinship Design Art Ecology. So I guess with actually I don't quite remember, but when we have do we just make a note of that and then accept the minutes as they are with that change? Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So with that one small typo adjustment, can I have a motion to accept the minutes? Thank you, Tony, and a second. Okay, thank you, Ken. Okay, now all through that business, we can move forward with the presentations tonight. So the first DP 001267 is being introduced by Christine. So I will pass over the mic to Christine, and after she's introduced the project, then the applicants can present and then we will move to comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So development permit application DP 1281 is for 3 fourplexes on 3 parcels, and each of them comprise of 2 2-bedroom units and two 1-bedroom units. The subject properties are zoned medium density residential, so that's R8, and they are designated neighborhood center in the city plan. So these properties are located on the east side of Millstone Avenue, and that's between Townsite Road and Rose Hill Street. So the properties also fall within Development Permit Area 8, so that's your form and character, and the General Design Permit Area design guidelines are applicable to the proposed development. There are several variances that are also part of this application. So one is for a 2.4 meter trellis on the lot where building 2 is. a reduction of the setback to the side yard. So that's 3 meters to 1.5 meters for each lot. A reduction of the setback for the rear yard, and that's from 10.5 to 9.08 meters. A reduction of the required number of parking spaces, and that's from 6 to 5. And then finally, an increase of the percentage of small car parking spaces, and that's from 40% to 80%. And I'm happy to take any questions, Madam Chair, when you're ready to do so.
Great, thank you. And sorry, could I also ask the applicants to introduce themselves and their relationship to the project before they speak, just for clarity for everybody? Thank you.
Okay. I'm Joyce. I'm the architect on the project, and I have my colleague here, Kriti. She's going to be doing her doing the presentation for us tonight and walk everyone through the project. And we've got Douglas, the owner, and we have Brad Forth, the landscape architect for the project. Okay, so shall we share our screen and present? Okay, so Kriti, and I'm here to answer questions and provide any additional feedback if need be.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kriti. I work for Joyce, and I'm excited today to present 404 and 406 Millstone. Let me share my screen. Okay. So here we have 404, 406 Millstone. We have 3 separate lots, and we're proposing one building with 4 townhome style units per lot. To explain the context a little bit, I want to bring your attention to the aerial image to the bottom right of the screen. If I zoom in here, you will see the lots demarcated in red. Lot 1 is lot 404, and lot 2 and 3 are lot 406. All 3 of the lots face Millstone Avenue on the west, and they have access to a lane on the east or the rear. In terms of the neighborhood, we have lots of single-family residences around. Specifically, the lots to the north and south of the proposed development are single-family homes. But across the street here, you see some commercial. To the south here, you see some multi-family residential. And so there's certainly a mixed sort of character in the neighborhood of this area. To elaborate on the site design, I think I'm going to move forward to the site plan. Now here we have our 3 lots, 1, 2, and 3. The design proposal on all 3 lots are identical, with the exception of lot 2 being a mirrored or laterally inverted image of lots 1 and 3. Overall, we have our building located front and center here, and our parking located in the rear, accessed from the lane. We have 5 spaces being proposed, parking spaces for the 4 units. 3 of these spaces are located outside, and 2 are sort of inset within the building. Also integrated in the building, we have a trash room that is located from the rear, a bike storage area that's accessed from the side, and some electrical and storage space as well accessed from the side. To access all of these spaces, we have 4 walkways across the 3 lots. Each of these walkways runs from the front of the lot to the rear. In the front of the lot, they are demarcated with entrance trellis features for wayfinding and signage. These lots, the central walkways are shared between the 2 buildings. And this also gives us some opportunity to provide additional landscape features between the 2 buildings. Another factor of separating the buildings that we find advantages is that we get additional windows sort of along the sides of the building, which makes the units, I think, much more bright and functional. In terms of the units themselves, we've divided our layout into 4 quadrants. The front 2 quadrants have our 2-bedroom townhome units that face Millstone Avenue and have entrances that face Millstone Avenue. The 2 rear units have entrances from the side of the building. Now, in terms of the elevation, I think I'm going to move on to our elevation drawing here. I think this is a good sort of graphic representation of the relationship of these buildings to the adjacent properties as well. You can see sort of the distances as well as the height relationship. And I just want to point out here that we're well within the allowable height limit for this particular zone. In terms of the design, I think I'm going to just jump over to the 3D model. And I want to point out that we've used sort of a combination of horizontal and vertical members to not only provide some functions such as balconies, privacy, and shade, but also to act as architectural features that break up the volume of this elevation into small, more relatable pieces. Now, we understand that there are 3 separate buildings, but our intention was to create sort of a more unified, cohesive design language across the 3 buildings. So they read more as one development and one community of 12 units rather than individual buildings. And we've used these design features sort of to incorporate different materials, colors, and textures that we've also wrapped around to the side of the buildings as well as to the rear. I also want to point out the roof forms. We have a combination of butterfly roofs and gable roofs. And I think when this building is viewed from various sort of angles and position, this does create some dynamic sense of movement, and it does draw your eye to the roof line. And that was the intention behind our roof design. Finally, I think I want to address some of the variances that we have requested for. In a nutshell, they're based on reductions of parking and setback. And I just want to explain where those are coming from. And for that, I'm moving back to the site plan here. And you might be able to observe that these sites are really narrow. In fact, the width of each of these sites is less than 12 meters. And that really is where our challenge comes from in terms of being able to provide the required minimum lane widths as well as parking stall widths to provide sufficient parking for the 4 units that's required for our clients to make this, this project viable. So basically the variance that we're requesting is a way to like mitigate the challenge that emerges from the site itself, to be able to provide sort of this cohesive development of 12 units across the 3 lots. And I think that's it for me. That concludes the architectural part of the presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. And I think I would like to now request Brad to sort of take over and explain the landscape design in further detail. But after that, we're happy to take to sort of open the discussion to comments and questions. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Brad Forth here from Foresight Landscape Architecture. I will share my screen. Can you see this one?
Yeah.
So I think Krithi explained this site really well. There's not too much to say, so I'll really focus just on the landscape features. The layout of the plan is pretty self-explanatory with these walkways that come in from the street. We're proposing special paving for each of those walkways with an expanded concrete apron at the entrance to each one, where we've incorporated a couple of benches on the 2 center ones. There's a special designed entry arbor at each of these walkways, and you can see that in the 3D rendering. It includes some signage element and some the way the fencing and overheads work is quite interesting. Off of each of the walkways, I've incorporated an outdoor patio space that addresses each of the units. These ones are direct access from the walkway, and these ones are 2 steps up because the grade of the site does fall. We've got 3 new deciduous street trees on Millstone, and some supporting landscaping out on the boulevard in terms of low grasses and plants to just create a softener on the front. And then in behind the 3 trees on Millstone, we've got position for 3 smaller scale ornamental trees to highlight the entrance of each building and create that kind of front yard garden feeling. and those would be set into planting beds at the with foundation planting. The down each of the corridors in the middle, we've incorporated timber planter elements, which help to retain the grading along here to allow access to these service rooms. And then those will have, again, foundation plantings to kind of create a beautiful kind of green walkway as you go through, with some punctuated with some colorful grasses. And then as you come through, you get to a stairway that then takes you to the back parking. The parking has been highlighted with special paving for permeability, stormwater control. And we've incorporated in the back parking, where possible, small trees in raised boxes, so that because it's a fairly large area, and it just seemed like I wanted to break it up a bit. And in the center of these 6-bay echelon, you can see we've incorporated in timber boxes a couple of small upright trees, like Japanese snowbell or something like that we'll use. And then on the sides to the top, we've got a planter with a mix of plantings to try and break up that that edge. Of course, we'll be fenced around the property on the sides and contained that way. And then other than that, well, we have the parking that comes in off the lane, right? But there's a couple of fingers of landscape space here, so I thought I would deal with those with large clump forming grasses like a miscanthus or Carl Forster grass that would be very upright and have some movement and everything, but would create kind of a visual edge, but wouldn't be a fenced edge. And I think that's it for the plan for this one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is Brad, may I ask you to stop sharing your screen for a moment, please?
Sure.
Thank you. So I'm assuming that you've finished presenting the project. Okay, so first I'd like to ask the design panel members, do you have any questions for staff before we move to our comments? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone having any questions. So we will move forward with our comments and possible recommendations. And Kevin, would you like to start tonight?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Joyce, Kriti, and Brad for your presentation. I think this is a very nice project. I really don't have any issues, more or less some questions about some things, but the first thing I'd like to ask is maybe you can just verify what the variances are, because I think they might be slightly different than what's outlined in the staff comments.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, you're right. Some of the variances that we've identified on our cover sheet are different from the ones identified on the staff comments, but the ones that the note on the city are something that we need to update. Those are the ones that are the actual variances being requested.
So there is a trellis or a fence height variance.
That's right.
A side yard setback.
Yes.
A parking variance, and also, is there a rear yard setback variance too?
Yes.
Okay, so that one wasn't in our agenda, I take it. Christine, do you want to just verify that?
Yeah, so what you'll see on the second page of the staff design comments, there's 5 different types of variances. So I sort of outlined them in my presentation, but you're right. So it's the rear lot line, so 10.5 to 9.08, so that's 1.42.
Yeah.
Your side lawn, so each side is meant to be 3 meters. They're asking for 1.5 on each of those sides.
Okay.
So that'll be on both. You've got your trellis. So there's 4 trellises. We do have a notwithstanding clause for 1 trellis, but one lot has 2 trellises. So that second trellis needs a variance. And then for the parking, they're meant to have 6 parking spaces. We're down to 5. And also small car spaces, we're going from a maximum of 40% to a maximum of 80%. So 4 out of those 5 spaces are small car.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Christine. Kriti, I notice on the site plan that in the carports in each building, one is designated standard size and one's designated small car. Why is the one designated small car? Because it looks like there's enough room for a standard size.
No, I can explain that. So if I move over to the site plan here, so one of the reasons why this is small car as well is so that we can maintain this line, if that makes sense. So we have a standard car, and if we had another standard car, it would cut into this space, and then we wouldn't be able to fit in this small car. And that all just comes down to sort of this width and how to fit stuff into the width.
Okay. That's good. Thank you very much for that. I support all the variances, and initially I was concerned about the side yard variance, but in looking at your calculations, you're well under the required or maximum floor area ratio, and also you're 10 feet under the maximum proposed height. And if you were forced to reduce the width of the buildings to acquire a 10-foot side yard, the opportunity would be there for the developer to add another story on and not require any variances to achieve what would be required. And in my opinion, I'd much rather see a 1.5 meter setback on the sides than I would a 3 meter if it was going to be increased in height. So, because when I look at the floor plans, I just can't see it possible if those units had to be reduced to accommodate those side yards, that you would be able to achieve a lot of what you're wanting, especially with the parking garages and stuff like that. So I support the variances. I like what you've done with the siting of the buildings, the corridors between the buildings. I really like that. Form and character, I like what you've done, Joyce and Kriti, with the style of the roof, how you varied the roof in the middle section to break it up from the sides. The only thing I would mention, and it was mentioned in the staff comments, is maybe there's ways that you can look to individualize and personalize each unit. That seems to be a common thing that comes up with these types of projects. There's ways you can do that, but I think it's something you could consider. That's pretty much it for form and character. Landscape, Brad, I think you've done a really nice job. How you've dealt with the landscape elements, both softscapes and hardscapes around the building, and especially between the buildings. I think you've done a great job. There was a comment in the staff comments about existing trees. So Brad, if you can just maybe comment on whether or not any of those trees could be retained.
Yeah, none of the trees on our site can be retained, although there are some adjacent trees on the adjacent sites, which will obviously work to make sure that those are looked after while we're doing the work on site. But I'm pretty sure that in this one we haven't been able to save anything on site. Okay. And Brad, is there any location where you can locate short-term bike racks? I was looking and I couldn't see any area, but I imagine there might be a spot we can squeeze them in there. It's pretty tight, but I think we can probably fit them in. I'm pretty sure we've got room, maybe just behind the trellises in the entrances there. There's a little bit of room at the front of the inside the fence behind the trellises. There's a little bit of room. I think we can fit some short-term bike parking in there. Okay. I think maybe for this one instance, I don't think we've got there. We didn't put it in for some reason, but okay. It's a good comment, and we could definitely add some. Right, and I'm assuming that you'll be looking at bollard lighting throughout most of the site with maybe wall packs between the buildings, or have you decided that yet? Yeah, no, it'll definitely be bollard lighting for these corridors and trying to keep the lighting levels, good at the ground level, but not hot, no light pollution. And I think it would be really enticing too to see the light between the buildings, and I think that would be quite nice. And
Yeah.
definitely we'll have lighting on the stairs. Will be built-in lighting so that they're well lit all the time.
Yeah, and obviously SEPT had issues you have to consider as well. So, but aside from that, other than looking to individualize and personalize the units and locating short-term bike storage, I think it's a very, very nice project. So well done, and thank you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And I'm not sure who's sharing their screen, but if they didn't mind not sharing for a moment, thank you. I can see the whole panel here. All right, Jason, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I agree with Kevin. I quite like this project a little bit. To be commended for using every single square inch of the site that you could. You really squeezed everything in. So good job on that. And incorporating those trees into the rear of the site. That's quite difficult to try to find space when you're so compacted like that. But
Jason, it appears you've frozen. Okay, maybe for the time being, I'm going to move on to someone else and then we'll return to Jason, if that makes sense, since he seems to be frozen. Okay, oh, Jason, now you're back. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Okay, keep going.
Okay. So I just had a few comments. One is, like Kevin had said, being more selective with material selection, particularly color, I think would be a nice way to help individualize the buildings. On that front elevation, the thing that caught my attention most was the fence. So being able to incorporate more natural or warmer materials into the palette of the building, or being able to accentuate the tectonic expression of the balconies using materiality, I think could be an interesting opportunity. And then picking up on something from the city comments or recommendations around the height of the building in relation to the neighbors. I understand you're well within your height allowance. However, since you are moving so close to the adjacent properties, there could be an opportunity for the rear units to allow the floor elevations to be slightly different and bring the rear end of the building down slightly, which could be a way to maybe break up the massing of the building a little bit. And by doing so, you might be able to get a couple of fewer steps and allow that entryway for the rear unit to maybe set back a little bit and have more of an entryway experience, which might be kind of nice. But otherwise, those are my only comments. So thank you very much, and great job.
Great, thank you, Jason. Moving on then to Tony, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with my colleagues. This is an excellent, efficient infill project that comes up looking very pleasing and will be a nice contribution to the streetscape. I think the scale of the interior spaces is done quite nicely. I don't have any problems either with the variances. I like very much the driveway paving, the effort you've gone through to address that and enhance it. And that you're below the maximum height. I think that's a really good thing. Couple of comments or questions, I guess. One, the windows facing one another on the two interior walkways, did you give any consideration as to how you might offset those so that you didn't have windows looking straight into windows just a few feet away? That would be an observation that I might suggest you consider, depending on the rest of the panel's feelings. Secondly, maybe I missed it on the drawings, I don't know, but at the two interior entrances, so the two pairs of interior entrances to the units, if I'm remembering that correctly, to sort of aid them in wayfinding and accent them, did you consider something like a small trellis or something to kind of highlight where the entrance is along that walkway? I agree with Jason. It's a bit of a drastic move, but considering the adjacent units, if you could find a way to lower the back units a little bit. Obviously, that would improve. I was going to say too that with all those stairs, obviously this project is not accessible to everybody. But then I realized that there are stairs internally. So with the townhouse, that's not a requirement. Too bad, but that's a reality. Otherwise, I think it's a great project, and thank you for your presentation.
Oh, great. Thank you, Tony. Would you like them to comment on any of what you said, or you don't need any clarification?
Well, I wouldn't mind if the issue of the interior facing windows, a distinction at the interior entrances, and I won't comment on the lowering of the rear building because Jason's already done that, but I was just going to add my thoughts on the a little more color distinction and possibly materials to just liven it up a little bit. It's very gray, and as Jason says, you know, the highlight sort of color-wise is the fence, and I think within the overall cohesive palette, you could introduce a little stronger contrast in materials and or colors. I think that would be an improvement.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and make a comment. No, we hadn't discussed staggering the windows. I think it's a really interesting idea, so we can address that. And no, we hadn't thought about putting a trellis between the two sort of middle units as wayfinding, and it's something that we can take a look at as well.
I think you've done that on some of your previous projects that I've seen, and I thought it was a really good detail, and perhaps might apply here. But thank you.
Yeah, I think my only challenge on this one is that on the other project, it was actually one site, and on this one, I'd have a structure spanning two separate sites. So in some ways, I don't know if there's a complexity to that when we start diving into more things, but I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Tony. And last but not least, Ken, would you like to comment, please?
Sure. I guess, first of all, I just agree with most of the comments. I had a few comments myself about the overall siting. I'm looking at the two other lots on the end. You've sort of landlocked those into just being a single family lot. And I don't know if the city takes a longer term perspective of what happens to those lots, you know, down the road, because now there's no option for those two lots. When I look at the site and what you squeeze onto the site, these three buildings, and you're asking for variances. So I guess my question would be, maybe you squeeze too much onto a site, or maybe it requires a different kind of concept. From my perspective, when I drove around, there's a building, I think down the road on Bradley, that's more of an apartment style building. And then another one that's two buildings with a courtyard in between. And I just, so when I look at this and I see three buildings really squeezed tightly, and then you're asking for, you know, variances on both sides, I don't think the two remaining lots are going to appreciate having a three-story building right next to them when they're just, some of them are, I think, 1.5 stories high. And I think the type of roof you put on sort of, it emphasizes the height. I noticed you have in the middle a hip roof, but on the two ends, they sort of go up on the ends. And whether that is appropriate for this area, because most of the rest of the buildings around that area are all standard roof, hip roofs or sloping roofs. And I agree with the front elevation that when you look at it, it's kind of bland and it needs something to perk it up. And I agree with the comments about offsetting windows. I think this narrow space between the buildings, I think it's around 10 feet. There's no scale, so it's hard to look at what you actually have between the buildings, but that's very close. And then you have openers right into that sidewalk space on both sides. So you're reducing again the size of those, the side, the walkway between. And also, you know, and those windows will be open once, because there's no way of getting cross ventilation through these units, so that you're gonna, you know, the den, for example, in unit 1 would be very stuffy unless you open the windows. So again, certainly the offset would really help offsetting the windows. Other than that, the landscaping, I'm not a landscaper, so I won't make too much comment about that. I'll leave that to Katie. She always has lots of comments about landscaping. So other than that, that's about the rest that I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ken. I think what I'll do is I'll make my comments, and then I may have some questions for everyone. Well, we'll round up what our overall comments are. And so, yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I agree with everything that has been said. And I think, again, you've squished in a lot onto a small lot, a lot onto a lot, and which is, again, I commend you for how much you've been able to achieve. My one thought, Brad, is just looking at the front street trees, and you have some plants underneath them, and then I guess it will be sod, and it seems logical to just go ahead and put all plants under there. Then you don't have to cut the grass or deal with leaf litter or any of that. But that's just my thought. I know part of it is on the city boulevard. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of grass inside as well. So
Yeah.
I thought it's probably, you know, not that big of a deal for them to just mow the little piece of grass outside. I mean, I'm with you that ease of maintenance and all of that, but I actually sort of think the traditional sense of the gates with the grass and it's like a low fence and then a little bit of grass with a bit of grass plant, ornamental grasses and stuff planted in front of the fence just to soften, kind of gives it that more suburban kind of feel, and kind of also forms a bit of a space around the trees and gives them more prominence. But I'm open to, if it's a suggestion, and if you'd like us to do that, that's not a deal breaker one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're going to make the right choice. You're the professional. And I guess I just was making a comment and see what you would say. Yeah.
I like the yin yang style of things. Sure. Some plant, some grass, and yeah.
Yeah, and I do like that you've I like that all the units have access to the front sidewalk, and there's a bench there. Sort of, it's also a signal to kind of the entry, and I think that works really well. So I had just noticed that there was a staff comment that maybe those benches, that the planting needs to be continuous, but I think you need that access to the sidewalk to make this site work. So I hope that you're able to retain each individual entry point there. Yeah.
Important, and then I think it works really well with this configuration to have those. So.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, to the comments made by the fellow members about possibly doing something to highlight the interior entrances. And if structure is not the way, it could be on the ground plane as well. There could be a change of surface there to indicate another entry point, and that might be a simpler way of marking the entries too.
That's actually a really good idea. Maybe in this situation where we can't cross property lines with structure, maybe a different color and format of pavers at those key node places would be a good way to do it. That's good, very good thought.
And other than that, I think you've done the best you can with the space you have. So thank you very much. So I'm going to move to trying to consolidate our comments. And I think the owner Doug. Yes, please go ahead. You want to make a comment? Yes. I'm not surprised.
Thank you. So again, we've come back to you. I think we now have 15 infill projects in some form in the DP process that we've either presented or are soon going to present to you. We're always coming with variances. And I just wanted to reiterate again why that's so, and maybe help address some of Mr. Shimizu's concerns or comments. Nanaimo Old City has many small lots. For example, this lot is only about 36 feet wide, but it has a wonderful opportunity in the fact that it is actually zoned multifamily. But the zone that it is in is far under what is conceived as the minimum lot size for that zone. So what we're end up facing the challenge is of setbacks that are designed for a much larger footprint. If we had the larger footprint, we wouldn't be asking for the variances. Right now, that area has one empty lot on it and one house on a double lot. So this project here will move from 2 single-family homes to 12 units located a block and a half from the elementary school. And Rose Hill itself is also highly zoned multifamily, and there are a tremendous amount of already established multifamily there. We could look at, the thought was, how do we creatively and thoughtfully reduce the impact? Certainly we could have went higher. It would have resulted in a blockier building and got the same density. But having the lot line very similar to the setback of 1.5, which is in other multifamily 4-unit projects, require only that setback. They don't actually require a 3-meter setback. We thought it would be more meaningful to ask for that variance and consideration than going up. And then lastly, certainly we could look at potentially reducing density, but it impacts 2 things. It impacts the viability of the project. And also, I'm a big advocate of Nanaimo's report called the Nanaimo Affordability Housing Strategy. And certainly this has become a prime civic conversation, affordability and housing. And I just want to bring to your attention objective 3. And I'll quote, "In the recent past, ownership of single-family detached homes in Nanaimo was attainable for moderate income households. With increasing real estate prices, choices in both rental and ownership have become constrained. In response, Nanaimo aims to facilitate a diverse housing option in order to create obtainable home ownership options and alleviate the pressure on the existing rental housing stock." So it's a very informative document, and I think it really rings true to what we're doing. And we're excited about our projects of meaningful infill and walkable distances to downtown. So we're taking multifamily zoned that has single family on it now, and we're adding meaningful density in a trying to lessen the impact of neighbors. And I guess just the final comment of the house on the left and right, those houses are also zoned in multifamily. So they do have the opportunity later on, if they so choose, to also add increasing density on their lots as well. So just wanted to bring up that document. It's something that impacts a lot of the comments in there are, I think, re-emphasize or endorse some of the variances that we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, panel, Angela had forwarded some of her comments, and I could, she was unable to attend, and I will just bring up, I have them here. I will just read them out, and we can decide whether we will incorporate any of them into our overall recommendations. So in site design, she asks if there's a need for a transit stop shelter. I don't believe, I'm not sure if I need to ask the staff member about that comment. Christine?
I'm not too sure. I can definitely look into that.
I can answer that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Please.
So in the city in Nanaimo for 4plexes and less do not require any frontage works and services, which would include bus stops.
Okay, excellent. I figured as much. Thank you. And we spoke about lighting. So she just brought up that lighting plan, which we know you will include, Brad, and then question, well, yeah, around disability parking. I think it's not a requirement for this type of development, so that's moot. And then building design. I think the one comment here that hasn't been brought up is just she wondered about the rear balconies, any potential for them to be larger than what they are. And let me just see. I think that's the main added comment that no one has brought up. So I don't know, Joyce, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, the reason we can't make the balcony larger is we're up against our lot coverage. So it would increase we're kind of at the limit.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, so I've got to round up our comments from I'll first go through what I think are definite recommendations, and then I want to find out what the panel thinks of, if I've missed anything or what we should include. So to number one, to look at ways to individualize each unit or buildings by incorporating color or playing with the materiality of each building. Oh, is that okay? Okay, I won't be able to repeat that. Number two, to consider offsetting these, do I say the side windows? The windows facing the side windows of each building facing each other. Maybe that's not clear-ish. Number three, to consider highlighting the internal entrances, whether, I'll just say to consider highlighting or improving the wayfinding to those units. Number four, this is a question mark whether we include this, to consider lowering the rear units to change the scale or lessen the impact of the scale of the building. What, is that okay? Does that sound okay, Jason? And I wondered too about, in that, would we like, based on some of Ken's comments, to consider looking at the roof line to lessen the height impact of the buildings? Do you want me to include that comment too? Did anyone? Oh, Tony, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm not quite sure where that comment came from. I know Ken's concern about the overall density and so forth. The fact is they are below the height, and a taller building could theoretically have been approved here than what's being shown. I think what sort of leaps out most for me in terms of the height is the fact that it's got a butterfly roof. And when you see that in dead elevation on the street, it looks, you know, higher than it, you know, another kind of roof would. But the fact is that you're not really going to see it in elevation, except, you know, very rarely. You're going to see it at an angle, and as soon as you see the angle, then you'll see that the roof does vary as it steps back towards the rest of the building. So I don't have a problem with that at all. You know, as far as lowering the back half of the building, that's a major undertaking. If it can be done readily, then sure, and it does reduce the steps and all the other stuff that goes with it that other people have mentioned. But you know, given what could be built here, you know, you know, for me, I think it's acceptable as presented. But in that we're only making suggestions and consider this kind of comments, I don't have a problem leaving it in if the rest of the panel wants to do that.
Yeah, Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I would just echo Tony's comments. I think the applicant has done a good job in breaking up the roof lines. They do go from a butterfly to a standard gable coming down through the middle portion of it. I looked briefly at kind of how the floor plan would be and how Joyce and Kriti would be able to break up the floor planes. I guess we can ask them to look at it, but I think it would be a major undertaking, in my opinion, to be able to do that. I'm not sure how Jason feels about that if he's looked at it, but yeah, I know it was his main comment. But it doesn't hurt for us to put in that they look at it. Whether or not it's achievable is another thing. So again, echoing Tony's comment, I'm happy that how the applicant dealt with the sides of the buildings, even though they're butterfly roofs. I think being that it's 10 feet under height, I think they've done a good job. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Ken, do you want to comment further? Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry, was that me?
No, Ken. Sorry.
Oh, I thought I thought you were going to Jason next. I'm sorry.
No, I've got all the architects slash.
I would just my comment would be that if you did look at offsetting the rear to the front unit, then you might want to treat the roofs differently. And to me, you see so many butterfly roofs now that it's becoming a cliche that, and there's no reason for this to be a butterfly roof. I mean, I've seen, around our neighborhood, they're all butterfly roofs now, all the recent buildings. And I just, this is just 3 infill housing units that they don't require that kind of emphasis on the roof. And it helps the neighborhood, I think.
Okay.
That was my.
Okay, thank you, Ken. And Jason, do you want to further any comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I don't have any comment around the roof. Obviously, the development as presented is allowable within the zoning. So my comment was just about trying to modulate and be a better neighbor to the adjacent units. Obviously, it's acceptable. I'm not going to comment on the style of roof. That's for the design team to come up with, not my design fee. So, but I just thought my comment was I thought there could be value added to the project by examining that, but I'll leave it as a recommendation only.
Okay. Okay. So I'm wondering if I should. Well, we have 3 definite recommendations or considerations. The one regarding individualizing each unit with color or materiality, to offset the side windows from each other, and 3, to highlight or improve the wayfinding to the interior entrances. So then the question mark is, do I leave on consider lowering the back units and or the roof design to reduce the height or the impact? Any last panel member comments? And Doug, I'm just going to hold off because these are just our recommendations. Yeah.
I think if you look at looking at offsetting the front and back units, then you might look at the roof, how
Okay.
you would treat the roof differently. That's all.
Okay.
So the roof is not related to, it's more the offset and the elevations of the front and back units.
Okay. Okay.
Whether that's viable or not, I don't know.
Okay. So we could, it sounds like everyone would be okay with us leaving that comment in because it's just a consideration and they will look at the viability of that to offset the back units. Is that agreeable, design panel members? Okay. Okay, so it's 4 recommendations. And just a reminder to applicant, again, these are our recommendations and you've heard the discussion and we understand, you will look at them and consider them yes, Kevin?
Just to be clear on this, the recommendation is to looking at offsetting the floor planes, correct?
Yes, I guess,
offsetting the floor planes.
With the intent of adjusting the massing, so the rear
Yeah.
half is
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
okay. So just to be clear, the number 4 is to look at offsetting the floor plans in order to change the massing or make it, or
The height,
okay?
the rear height, yeah.
The rear height. Okay, whoever is taking notes, is that clear enough? Do they need me to repeat anything? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So could someone make a motion, please? Yes, Kevin? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks. I would make a motion to accept the application as presented with support for the variances and with those 4 recommendations.
And a seconder? Jason, and all in favor? Okay, well, there you go. Thank you very much again for your presentation, and have a good evening. Okay, so moving on to our second DP application. DP, what is number are we at today? 001284. I'll ask Caleb to introduce the project.
Great. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as noted, the second item on tonight's agenda is development permit 1284. The property address is 564th Street and 361 Howard Avenue. The proposal for this development permit is a multifamily residential townhouse project consisting of 22 three-story buildings with a combined total of 168 dwelling units, in addition to an amenity building, as noted in the staff design comment. The zoning is currently undergoing a rezoning to a new CD11 zone, and that rezoning did receive third reading following a public hearing about 2 weeks ago. The relevant design guidelines are the general development permit area design guidelines. And lastly, just note that there is one variance requested, and that is to vary the side yard setback from the north property line from 3 meters to 2 meters. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Caleb Horn. And so now I will turn it over to the applicant. And if you could please introduce yourself and highlight the relationship you have to the project. And
Hi.
Hello.
Can everybody see us?
Yes.
I recognize some of you. It's nice to see you all again. Thanks for spending your evening with us tonight. My name is Mark McCall. I'm Vice President with Strand. And I'm also the development manager on this project. This is Rob Sikosi, who's the architect of the project. And we have Monish with us as well. I'm going to just introduce a little bit.
We also have our landscape architect.
Oh yeah, sorry, Brad's here too. He's somewhere. Brad Forth. We already saw him tonight, so I think we all know Brad. We all know and love Brad. So Strand's a family-owned and operated developer based in Vancouver with 40 years of experience, long-standing commitment to tenants and homeowners. So tonight's proposal being put forth is a result of many discussions with staff, councillors, and community members who attended our public open house in May. Tonight, we're excited to speak to a refined development proposal that will transform vacant land into attainable family homes. I'd like to also point out that we had unanimous support by City Council at our public hearing 2 weeks ago, and the local community rallied around us as well. I'll hand it over to Rob.
Actually, okay. Okay, good evening. Happy to be here and excited to present this project to you. I'm just here to sort of go over the form and character we're proposing for this project. And before I get into that, I thought I would just do a quick overview of the site. As mentioned before, we're proposing 168 units, and they're comprised of mostly 3-bedroom units, and 8 of those units are 4-bedroom units that range from about 1,350 square feet to 1,700 square feet for the 4-bedroom units. On this slide, you can see the distribution of the that we're proposing of the different unit types, and you can see these purple units at the end are the 4-bedroom units. There's 8 of them through the site, And for the most part, we have an interlock style unit, which I can go through with you on the plan. So mostly a tandem parking garage arrangement, except for these end units you can see in the sort of dark brown color, are going to have a side-by-side garage, I believe. Well, those ones don't. I'm sorry. The 4-bedroom have a side double garage. For the most part, we have an interlock type unit. They're about 15 to 16 foot wide. Then we have this one building here, which is what we call them wide shallow units. And I'll go through those plans. So the next slide. So this is what we've chosen as building 19, and it is a pretty generic building. It shows the interlock units with the tandem garage at the ground level, and the end units will have a double garage arrangement, and that's the 4-bedroom. So the 4th bedroom is on the ground floor, and then you go up to the main floor. Obviously, this main floor at the end units are opened up a bit more with a small sort of den here off the living room, so it gets a bit more open. But these are your typical units here. Again, a nice large kitchen, dining and living arrangement, and then you move up to the upper floor, which has the 3-bedroom arrangement. The reason why we call it an interlock is you can see here the party wall interlocks here. So you're able to get in that 30-foot module, you're able to get a master bedroom and 2 smaller bedrooms, and then it kind of alternates, flipping back and forth. What we have included on this slide is our garbage staging plan. This is quite typical. So there's in every garage, there'll be room for 2 bins in there, and on garbage day, they get rolled out to the driveway apron for pickup. I just thought we'd show that because that was raised with our planning department. Next slide. So this is the elevations for building 19, and I guess we're proposing a fairly we're a very simple sort of traditional, sort of a contemporary interpretation of traditional. So in other words, not too much ornamentation, but very simple kind of traditional forms like the gabled roofs and the shed roofs. And what we've done is some very subtle moves along the roof lines, because typically in a townhouse project like this, you'd have a sort of common roof, and then you articulate it with gables and sheds, and you'd punch the gables out. That would then break up the roof line. In this case, we've also stepped the roof lines ever so subtly to create a little bit of a step along that ridge. So moving on to the face here, what we've done to the face here is you can see we introduced these simple elements, these little bays that pop out, which also provides protection to the sliding door out to a full width deck. This is on the roadside. You can see the garage doors below here. And each garage will have a man door access into the garage through a man door. And this is those 4-bedroom end units here. And what we've also used is, and I'll get into this later in our material color boards, but we use color and material textures to provide that individual unit sort of rhythm along the facades. What we have here is this is what we call a true end. And what we've done here, we've orientated doors out to the street in cases. For building 19, this door is orientated out to the public path that we have on our site plan, which our landscape architect will show you on his plan there. So there's a public path going through the site, 6 meters wide, and we've introduced these little doors. And also off of Watfield, and we've also introduced this elevation here to provide some sort of sense of entry or connection to the street. But this is what we call a true end, very visible end. And this is in between the buildings. And there we've incorporated the electrical closets, and we have a small bay in there. So this is simply, you won't see these side elevations, but we sort of done a nice composition there for that. Next slide. This is the building 21, which are the wide shallow units. And again, they're a 3-bedroom unit, but they're quite wide and shallow as I described it. They have a double garage arrangement. And in the case of this building, we've also got an electrical room at the end there. But you can see here the arrangement, you come into the garage floor, you come up to a living floor, and then to a 3-bedroom arrangement on the upper floor. Next slide. So we're able to take the character that we on the other buildings and sort of maintained it through here. But here you get that offset where you're looking at a master bedroom and 2 bedrooms. So you always get this sort of odd pattern but we've carried through some of the elements from the other buildings just to tie it all together. Very simple gables and bays that pop out, and all the entries are defined. This entry here is very similar to building 19, so we have a little shed roof. So a very simple approach to the massing. And again, we break up the massing along the roof lines to create a little bit of interest on the roof. And three-dimensionally, what you'll see is these things do pop out. And we have some three-dimensional images I can show you later. In the case of this building here, this west elevation is the true end. So we created a nice composition and carried through some of the character elements that we have elsewhere. Again, a door connecting to the road, facing the road, and a very simple end. This is the invisible end, I guess, on the east side. And it's basically, we have incorporated our electrical closets again here. Next slide. On the site, there's an amenity building, and which consists of, it's a two-story amenity building, and it has, a fitness area, a lounge area, and also this is an accessible washroom here. We also have our mail here, so there's parking near here. There's bicycle parking out front, and you have access to the mail room here through here to access your mailboxes. This is for the mailman to access through. Oops, sorry. Next slide. Go back. Sorry. And this is the vestibule entrance into here. And we have a staircase taking you to the upper floor, along with a elevator that also take you for accessibility. This is a small mechanical room. So upstairs we have a small theater, a games room, a couple of offices that can be used, and again some washrooms. And just this is the two-story volume looking over the lounge area. Next slide, please. So the elevations we've done for the amenity building picks up a lot of the elements from the townhouses and gets incorporated here. So it ties in nicely. As some feature window elements, some very simple gables over the entranceway. And this gable here, as you'll see in one of our slides coming up in the 3D, you'll see how this addresses the parquet that we're proposing on our site. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the material color board. So again, a very simple material and color palette. What we've done is to provide individuality and identity to the units. We looked at 3 different color door types that we're going to propose in each building, and also a mixture of shingles and siding using sort of a simple palette of colors of grays and whites, and then articulated with these colored doors. And again, we use the color to break up the building to create that individual unit type, as you can see in this little image here. And also in the back here, you can see how it really starts to define each of the units. And very subtle variations too. We would go to a white siding to a light gray siding, and the darker gray shingles here. So again, simple palette and of colors and materials. Next slide. So now we've put it all together. These are the streetscapes. You can see this is along 4th Street here. So again, all the doors fronting onto 4th Street. And you can start to see the rhythm of the different units marching along there. And then we have along Watfield again, these end elevations, we introduced a doorway there to connect. We also have some units facing onto Watfield. This is building 19 that I went through with you. This is that we're requesting that setback variance right here on the north end of building 19. And this is along the streetscape along Watfield, along the on the west side of Watfield. And you can see all these units here have doors that front onto Watfield, and these end units here. Next slide. So now we've got a series of kind of perspectives. I just want to kind of quickly walk you through it so you get a sense of how the architectural character engages the walkways. Like this is a north-south a multi-use path that we're proposing between. This is not our property here. This is a future development, but we've developed it to show what it would feel like through that MUP here. And this is our development here, and you can see how we engage it with these bays and how it and the buildings come along here. So this is along here. There's lots of landscape, and which landscape we'll get into later. Next slide, please. This is the amenity building here. You can see that element there, how it kind of addresses this outdoor green here. And this is the multi-use path. This is an east-west multi-use path going through the site, and that goes between buildings 19 and 18. And it also goes past the amenity building here. Next slide. So this is a view looking towards Foster entrance from Watfield. So this is what you feel as you come into the site. You can see how this is a true end elevation here with a little door. Even though the front door is here, we introduce another door there, so to really carry that character around the corner on the true ends. And this is the multi-use path here, connecting pathway from 4th. This is 4th here, and this is the beginning of that multi-use path. This is the adjacent development, and this is our development here, but we just carried the architecture over here just to give it a sense of scale and how it would feel as you enter the multi-use path. Next slide, please. So this is the entrance off of 4th Street here. So these are, again, doors facing onto 4th. This is the new road Watfield that we're proposing. And there'll be a sign here, a project signage here on the corner of Watfield and 4th. Next slide. And this is a 4th Street walkway entrance. Again, looking at that entrance, and just along here, we'll have fencing along here, fencing along 4th Avenue with little gates to each entry door. And now this is a view from Road F. So basically, it's looking between the buildings. This is where the cars, where the roads are, the internal roads, and you turn into your driveways, into your garages. You can see some blue colored doors here. So a very simple palette of color and materials. So it creates a nice sort of calmness through the development. And this is the view from the future Foster Street. So there's future Foster Street would be along here. So again, we've turned the doors to address that. And this is where that right now there's the public path continues back here and connects to the front doors for these units here. Next slide. So this is kind of like a quick overview of the site. Looking over the site here is that bird's eye, we call it, and so you can see Watfield and just how the development works. Next. Again, this is looking southwest towards 4th Street from Watfield. So along Watfield, we have a sidewalk along one side with a boulevard and some street parking along there. So it's really activated along there. All the doors fronting out there. So it's quite an activated experience through there. It's another north-south connection. So from here, I'll pass it on to Brad, our landscape architect, and we'll go through that. And then I'll be glad to answer any questions you have after this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So this project has some very interesting, let's talk about it globally first, sort of a big picture. I worked very hard on this one to make sure that the internal roadway systems of the project were quite green and had opportunities for trees. Sometimes in these kinds of projects, that's not paid attention to, and so you can see in the renderings where the landscaping informs the quality of the street by having a difference between small columnar trees and then smaller accent trees that are in a different color. And I worked in this project to make sure that those interior spaces, that the landscape would read as a very dynamic, pleasant interface between the buildings. The main road of Watfield, of course, it has its own character with wider grass boulevards and then large trees where the islands bump out, and those would be large-scale deciduous trees to basically create that Main Street kind of feel. And then in between those trees on a grass boulevard, I've introduced a secondary scale accent tree, like a Japanese flowering plum or something like that, which is a different quality again, so that each of the roads has this dynamic landscaping. And then in between the buildings where the people have their backyards, essentially that's a very detailed space back there. And I think in maybe the next slide shows that, if we could switch slides. Let's maybe I'll talk about this one first. This one is the piece of land. It's like a panhandle off of Howard Avenue. And it's actually a lovely piece of property that has some large existing trees on it, that the intent is to keep those large trees there and really emphasize this as a parquet space for the whole neighborhood and for the new residents of this project. And so what I did is I defined the space with a large lawn element that is bounded by perennial borders, and that's something that normally, you know, we're not doing too much of. But I think on a project like this, it would be wonderful for the community to come to a place like this that would have a full-blown perennial borders. We've incorporated a children's play area in this parquet, and that is intended to be natural timber elements, kind of a nature play, but also following in line with CSA standards for the kind of play structure you would expect on a project of this quality. And I've also added new coniferous vegetation on the perimeters, new frontage vegetation, and even 2 new street trees on Howard. And then I bounded this whole new open free play lawn with flowering trees to give it another intermediate level of canopy. And then the width of the walkway that goes through the thing was defined by the Parks Department, and that is this wide multi-use trail element that comes through, and it carries through in other area of the project as well. So if we flip to the next one, yeah, this shows you the basically the typical backyard space. And in this project, what we're doing is they're back-to-back fenced yards, and they each yard alternates, one with a tree, then one will have a large shrub like a rhododendron as its focal point, and then it goes back to tree, and it does that through the course. And then they alternate between each other so that the trees aren't right side by side. They go back and forth, if you follow. There are planting borders in here that they'll come equipped with plants that are already installed for the residents. So there will be bordering plants, and then some area in the front, which could be allowed for their own vegetable gardening, but each one will have a nice quality of landscape already, including a vine. Each garden will have a vine. And then along the back fence line, I've put in a drainage way, which is a river rock corridor that is on each side of the fence. So each yard has a drainage way, so that always ensures that each of these back gardens is sloped and pitched towards that drainage route. And that ties in, of course, to our civil engineering. And then this, the next one down from, you see an E on it there, that one shows the end unit, how it kind of wraps around the end of the building and gives people exiting option from that end unit to the corridor that's in between the buildings. And now the buildings are broken up into their distinctive blocks, and then those spaces between the buildings incorporate parking stalls for visitors. And those visitor parking stalls are then have, you can walk across them, and then they access with a walkway to the electrical rooms that are between that space. And then we've done kind of a mix of river rock and stepping slabs and interesting kind of ways of getting that, breaking up that surface, but yet providing all the necessary access to all the water servicing boxes and all of the things that come with a project of the scale. And then if you look at the drawing, which is on the left, you'll see that it says 2-meter sidewalk. Well, that's on Watt Field. And we've incorporated every location for the hydro kiosks along Watt Field, so that it's pre-planned. They're going to be going in those locations. We're able to fence and screen around each one at each of those locations, and they become part of the streetscape of Watt Field, and they're nicely buffered from the individual patios. And just the last comment about the patios, we're thinking in this project of using HydroPress slab pavers as the patio surface, which I think is a really nice, modern, elegant surface for these patios. People don't have lawns for obvious reason, but they do have this really rich surface that they can spend time on. Next slide, please. And then this last image just shows a kind of a palette of plants. I'm thinking of using really small trees that maintain their structure and character over time, that they don't get too big, that they crowd out the buildings. Japanese snowbell is one of those trees. It grows like a medium scale, so it can actually look like something and really create this permanent streetscape that's got a beautiful structure to it. Other trees like Japanese maples or vine maples and other smaller accent trees will be used for the individual yards. And then in the back, I'm proposing to use like columnar beech trees, either golden or Docks purple, to give us that vertical separation between the gardens and between the units. Looking across at your neighbor, there'll be these quite large scale, 30 to 50 feet tall trees ultimately that are very narrow, that don't waste the garden and don't crowd it out. So everyone keeps their garden and the trees always stay as envisioned originally. And then the trees on Watfield are with the larger larger deciduous trees. I'm thinking of Katsura tree, a very beautiful form tree, disease resistant, beautiful fall color, and will give that beautiful kind of suburban flair to the site. And I think that's my last slide. So I hand it back to Mark. So maybe just one more. This just shows a palette of plants, and then here's the slab pavers for the patio, river rock borders. We've used stepping slabs on gravels in some locations between the buildings. And there's a little image of what the snowbell trees look like when as they get a little bit bigger. You can see they don't overwhelm the scale of the units. Wood fencing consistent on the whole project that will be signature with the development. And then a play structure that looks something like this using natural timbers in the amenity space, with the amenity building overlooking it for good visibility and septet control. And then next.
Okay.
Then that's back to Mark.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I just wanted to summarize that we have 168 family-sized townhomes, all 3 and 4 bedrooms. All homes have 2-car garage, balconies, and a backyard. Community features a 2,200 square foot amenity building with gym, kitchen, lounge, as we've seen, multimedia room, and dog wash. Landscaped, age-friendly 14,000 square foot park with children's play structure. And the site will also provide 400 meters of multi-use paths for the public to use, which will connect the public park along Howard Avenue to the intersection of 4th and Lambert. Thanks.
So we just put together this quick little fly through just to give you a sense of the project altogether with the landscape and the architecture. And so just bear with us for another minute here.
We can entertain any questions, I suppose, while we go through this as well.
Yeah, the units you see at the top of the screen there, that's the adjacent project. So we thought we'd put this in here for context, future context, I guess. Now we're looking at the intersection of 4th and Watfield.
Oh, it doesn't seem to be showing for us.
Oh, is that right? That's okay.
Oh, we're not sharing the screen?
You're sharing now you're not sharing, but we weren't seeing your.
Oh,
interesting.
Hang on, we'll just do that now. Here, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, so we just backed it up a little bit. Sorry about that. I thought you guys could see it. Yeah, so this is looking down at the parquet here. And you can, and so we kind of double back. And that you can see the public path coming through. You can see the connection through, and then the path comes out to Watfield and it turns right and connects up along future Foster Street and then continues down between the 2 developments. So the units you see at the top of the screen here, are the future future project. It's the adjacent project, but we put that in there to sort of give a sense of future context. Now we're sort of focusing in onto the corner of 4th and Watfield. This is the public path that connects from 4th that runs north-south through the site. So on the right is our development, on the left is a future development. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to open up the floor to the design panel members if they have any questions for staff before we begin. Okay, Kevin, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Is it the intention that when Watfield Road or Watfield Avenue goes through towards 3rd Street, is that going to be permitted for vehicles or just going to be a pedestrian link through there?
Watfield is a public road.
That's a question for
It's going to be a public road that'll connect the 2 roads for vehicles.
Yes.
Okay, that's the only question I have for staff.
Oh, sorry. I answered staff. Sorry about that.
Staff agrees.
Thank you. Thank you, staff.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? No. Okay, then. Well, why don't I start with Ken? Would you like to comment first?
Well, when I first looked at the site plan, I thought, oh, wow, it's pretty dense. But as I studied the plans and the drawings and the elevations and the perspectives, I began to appreciate the quality of the effort that was put into the design. And I certainly appreciated the elevations that a lot of effort was put into making it interesting and not bland. And I even like the idea that they did study the shadows when they were doing their planning. And I think that it's setting a nice high standard for the neighborhood. And I think it's a quality development that should be well accepted by the community. And I don't have any problem with the variances. That's my comments.
Okay, great. Thank you very
I'm
much.
impressed.
Thank you. Okay, I will move forward to Jason, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I had a similar reaction to Ken when I first saw it. I looked at the density and thought, oh wow, and then as I looked into it, it kind of revealed itself more, and I started appreciating it more. And I'd like to start off by commending you for such a large development consisting entirely of 3 and 4 bedroom units. That is an incredible feat to achieve, and I think that's a real benefit to the community, as well as the restoration of Watfield. I think bringing that through and connecting it restores the integrity of the neighborhood and the transportation through. So I appreciate both of those moves. Unlike the previous project, I think the materiality and the colors that you have presented are appropriate based on, I think there's enough critical mass that the light color and the limited color palette actually works well. And in fact, the light palette brings out a more kind of airy and light feel to the entire development. Whereas if it was just a few units, it would probably need some assistance in that regard. But in this case, I think it works well because of the density that you've been able to achieve. And likewise, the massing, in my opinion, doesn't really lend itself to trying to break it up with additional materiality. So I think the way that you've presented it and the palettes you've provided, I think are appropriate and appreciated. The other thing I really liked is how you ended the site to the north and south by breaking up the scale and the rhythm of the buildings. So instead of being 2 buildings, you've got 3 buildings. And so that invites some visual permeability so that instead of staring straight through the site, the project reveals itself from the streets, which I think is quite nice. My only disappointment, and I'll just leave it at that, is that in between the interior sets of buildings where the parking spaces are currently located, I would think that it would be really nice to be able to connect that for connectivity, as if a muse or something along those lines, as opposed to closing it off and fencing it apart. Even if the entire width isn't given over to a public access way, being able to slip between there and create connectivity, I think will enhance the sense of community that you've already established on the site. But otherwise, those are my only comments. Great job. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Jason. And Tony, would you like to comment, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a great project and something that's really, really needed these days, not just in Nanaimo, but just about everywhere for family accommodation. It's great. And to include the amenity package and the parkette as an integral part of that is right on the money. I had a couple of minor comments. First of all, the form and character I think is generally good, as has been commented. It's kind of a contemporary classic, if you will. I might disagree a little bit with Jason in that I found that the colors along the streetscape on the exterior of the site were pretty overwhelmingly white, and I would have liked to see just a little bit more color variety on there, but you know, perhaps that's just a matter of taste. But it did leap out at me when we went through that fly through, more so even than on the other drawings. Not a big problem. One query I had, I was curious on building 21, I think it was. You introduced a shed unit instead of all the gables that you have everywhere else. I was curious why you did that. It's, you know, slightly jarring, and it's the only place that I saw it on the whole development. And it just looked a little bit out of scale because there was nothing on that projected shed unit, which made it look very tall, as opposed to the rest of it where you've done all those gables and dormers and so forth extremely successfully. So that was just an observation. The only other comment, the variant, I don't have a problem with the variances, by the way. And the only thing I do have a problem with is the driveways. And I bring this up on just about every project that it seems these days, is if there's any way to mitigate the driveway appearance. You don't have room to, you know, meander it or jog it or anything like that. I appreciate that, but just something with the surface texture, color, just to break up, you know, it looks like an airstrip. You know, I'm exaggerating just to make my point, obviously, but I think that there could be some attention paid to mitigating the sort of unbroken straightness of those driveways. Otherwise, I think it's a great project. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I wondered, would the architects want to comment on that one, the unit that he referenced? Was it
building 21?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, building 20, that's where we introduced a shed roof, but that's the back side of the building. So we thought we'd just sort of calm it down a bit and we got all the character elements out onto the street where the front door is. And we sort of played down the back a bit and went to a shed roof. We do have shed roofs in other at the ends. Actually, also if you go to building 19, what we have is that double bay, and then we gable one half of it and then shed the other. So there are sheds on all the other buildings, but on building 20, I'm assuming you're talking about the south elevation on building 21. Are we able to bring that up maybe, or?
The south elevation of building 21 is what I was referring to.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
It just
yeah.
looked,
So we could just quickly.
it was like, why does this not look like everything else, kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, what I can do is we'll go to building 21. Okay. Yeah, there it is there. So you're talking about this elevation here where we have shed roofs, where we have a double bay.
Yes.
Now, again, this is the backyard, and it's not seen as much, but we did bring all the character elements here. But you can see here where we have a double bay condition, we do a gable and then a little shed roof beside it to sort of maintain that sort of rhythm of these small gables marching along here. I mean, we could potentially do this kind of treatment back here where we put a gable there just to bring some character to the backside, which is definitely possible too. So it's a good point, and we could definitely address that if you like. Yeah.
I think that perhaps more than the roofs is that those vertical elements that have the shed roofs on them on that south elevation are pretty blank looking, and maybe that's why it sort of popped off the page at me as being
Will be fences.
very tall element. So
sorry.
Between there, what you can't see is the landscaping. So right there, there's a 6-foot privacy fence.
Yeah,
with
good point.
With cedars and.
Anyway, I mentioned it as a minor point. So
okay, thank you.
Fair enough. Now we could look at maybe
it.
a window there. We should look at that.
Thank you.
Ground floor, but thank you very much. Yeah. So we could just. How do we?
Great. And if you don't mind, to stop sharing again.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Stop share up there. Okay.
Great. Thank you. And Kevin, we'll move forward and.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. A very nice project. I don't really have much else to add. I think you've done a real nice job with the siting of the buildings, and I support the variance as well. Form and character, again, there's a lot of things mentioned regarding colors and materials, and I guess it is sort of a matter of taste, but I think the way the buildings are presented, I have no issues. I might have done it differently, but I have no issues with the form and character and the colors and materials. Landscape concept, really no issues at all. My only comments really revolve around, I guess, personal safety. The access road that comes in off of Howard will be a road that I would imagine will be used, especially for those buildings that are in close proximity. And you have a parquet, or I guess, or a playground, and it's sort of divided down the middle. And I would probably warn about, vehicles driving through there and children playing, crossing the road, and looking at ways to make sure that the safety of the people living there and living in the neighborhood are addressed. And I'm not sure if Brad or Rob or anybody wants to comment on that.
Kevin, that's actually a multi-use trail, believe it or not. It's not a road. It's actually a multi-use trail that goes through, and the width of it was defined by, Mark might be able to correct me, I think from the Parks Department.
Correct.
That wide thing, it's, in my opinion, it's too wide. So I think, it chops the park right in half. I had a trail through there that was like 2.5 meters wide, which was much more appropriate, but this is the directive that we got from Nanaimo City.
So will there be bollards out on Howard to prevent vehicles from going through?
Yes. Yeah, that's how we would definitely handle it.
Okay.
I'm still hoping that maybe we can get it reduced in width to something a little bit more reasonable, but for now, I don't think one way or the other. That's what the city would like, and so we're just in what they like right now.
Well, that's good. That's good to know, because I wasn't sure how that was going to be addressed. I was initially worried about, and it's difficult to see on this scale, how Watfield Avenue is going to work as it connects to 3rd Street, because a lot of vehicles could use Watfield now as a shortcut to get through, and vehicles speeding down through there, it kind of worries me. I guess the neighborhood will have to deal with that. When you deal with that much density on this property and a lot of people walking around, it could be a concern down the road. Aside from that, there's pedestrian connections, trying to deal with them down the drive aisles, and I'm not sure there's really no solution for that. I wish there was a solution where you can change the texture of the hardscape surfaces down all these individual roads, but I don't think it would really work that well. I think what Tony mentioned, at looking at ways to maybe vary the hardscapes to provide a little bit different texture throughout might be a way to do it, just to break that up a bit. But other than that, that's really, there's nothing that I would be recommending. I think it's a very good project. So thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kevin. Okay. Again, before I say my comments, actually, I will read Angela's first. Angela, one of our design panel members who was not able to attend. So this is I think a question for Caleb regarding transit stop shelter, but I think I'm going to guess there's something probably on 4th Street, not too far from this project.
Yes, sorry, and through the chair, you're just the question is regarding what the location of the nearest bus stop?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm reading Angela's comments, and she was asking about transit shelter, transit stop, if that was considered or necessary for this project.
Right. So unlike the previous project, which was too small to trigger frontage works, this one will trigger frontage works along 4th Street as well as along the dedicated Watfield Avenue. I'm just checking the map here. I don't believe there is a bus stop immediately adjacent to the property. So I don't think there would be one rebuilt there, but I do know that there is expected a bus route along 4th Street. But I don't envision there being actual new a bus stop constructed as part of the frontage works here.
Okay, I'm just making sure I represent Angela. Sorry, thank you, Caleb. Thank you. There was a question regarding how emergency vehicles move in the site. I don't know if the architects would want to address that, but
what's that? Oh, emergency vehicle, fire truck access.
Oh, fire truck access.
We didn't have a diagram in the presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Because it doesn't really have anything to do with form of character, but yeah, it's been accommodated everywhere.
Yeah, no, we comply with the requirements. The roadways are 6 meters wide for the access routes, and they're less than 300 feet dead end. So we comply with that. All the radiuses into those roads are the inside radius is 30 feet, 9 meters. So yeah, it all works. 12 meters center line radius. Yeah. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually just reading comments from a design panel member who wasn't able to attend.
I see. Okay.
I'm trying to just sort of jump through and figure out what wasn't.
Is that from Marie Leduc?
No, it wasn't from Marie, but that would be nice too. She's off as well.
So okay. Sorry, who was it from? I'm just making notes.
Angela Buick.
Angela Buick, thank you.
Yes. And regarding building design, just a question about whether there was any consideration for green infrastructure, for example, solar or retrofit for solar, sustainable building materials, local food production. So these are notes. But it does raise a question for me on how stormwater is being managed on site.
Natural infiltration. So we consider the hydropress pavers to be a permeable finishing product. There'll be, I can't remember how many millimeters of topsoil that are there. We have perimeter drains around every building. We have trench drains at every unit in every yard. So I think we're we're ticking those boxes quite well.
Okay. Okay, good. I don't see any other of her comments that weren't addressed. Okay, then I'm going to move on to myself. Thank you very much for your presentation. I agree with everything that has been said. I too at first had the same reaction. Wow, a lot of density, but once you go through your project, you see what you're doing and what you're achieving. And I found it helpful to know what was happening on that adjacent property, to understand the layout of everything. My main concern with this project is the amenity, the amount of actual amenity space. So I recognize you have the dedicated park, but given the number of units, it's not that big. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but I don't really know what else you can do. And then my other really big concern is that your whole site is really developed. And so you have very little tree canopy coverage. And as we all have experienced and know, we're going through some changes in climate, and we experienced a heat dome last year. And the number one recommendation coming out of that, reported in BC, for cities and municipalities, is to increase their tree canopy coverage. So I would really strongly encourage you to contemplate that, given the way this developed, how much land this development takes up. And if we were to measure that to canopy coverage, your tree canopy coverage is lower than what I think you would really want, and you're going to benefit, your project's going to benefit the tree canopy coverage. So whether Brad looks at doing a little more denser, maybe sometimes switching from columnar to more to larger branching, so you get that coverage, that canopy coverage. I would like to see the landscape architect try to increase that if possible. And that's my main number one recommendation. And I think your tenants will appreciate that as well. And it will benefit your project and the lifespan of those buildings and the heating and cooling and everything. Okay. So I think we almost have all, besides exterior set color, driveway surfacing, I really only counted possibly one or two recommendations. One was to look at varying the surface of the driveways to break up the expanse of paving. And I guess my own, to increase the tree canopy coverage of the site. And then I'm just wondering, Tony, if you would like me to comment on the exterior buildings color or variation.
No.
Okay.
No, nobody else really picked up on that, and it was a pretty small point, the same as my shed point on that building 21. So I don't need to belabor those. Thank you.
And thank you, Tony. And Jason, would you like to include a comment regarding the looking at ways to make that internal between the buildings as a pedestrian muse space?
Perhaps just as a recommendation, but just something to be explored. But yeah,
okay.
Nothing further than that.
Okay, so then I would say there's three recommendations. I'll just repeat. One, to look at ways to break up the driveway surfacing or change of material to the driveway surfacing. Number two, to increase the tree canopy coverage of the site. Number three, to consider or look at ways to make the space between the buildings where the visitor parking is as a possible pedestrian muse, sort of semi-common space, sort of walkway. That my long-winded comment. Okay. So very few comments. Well, so could I please have a motion to accept the project as presented? Yes, thank you, Tony.
And that was with
Yes,
support.
yeah.
That was with support for the variance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'll let Tony, do you want to say the official motion?
Well, I'll move support for the project, including the variances and with the recommendations that you outlined so eloquently.
Oh, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Okay, Kevin, thank you. And all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. We appreciate the attention to detail in presenting your project.
Thank you so much all for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Yeah.
Unanimous vote. Thank you, Caleb, and all
Yeah.
city staff and all
Yeah,
the
thanks
panel.
everyone. Appreciate
Appreciate it very
much.
much. Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.
Yes.
Thanks,
You as
guys.
well. Thank you. Okay, and then Tony, yes.
Oh, just a request, if we're going to continue for a few minutes, may I request a 5-minute washroom break?
Oh, okay. Yes, sure. And I think my agenda item can hopefully be short and also carried on at another date too. So yes, would you want to break for a couple minutes, or does that make sense to everybody?
Well, if we're just going to be a couple more minutes, then I can wait.
Okay, are you sure? Okay. So
All right, let's carry on. Sorry.
okay, sorry, Tony. I don't want to keep everyone because it's been a long evening, but I mostly wanted to find out from staff. So moving on to the final sort of other business that we added to the agenda. What sort of how, I guess it just more of a discussion, a quandary about how we, given that our mandate is, part of our mandate objectives is to support staff with developing design guidelines, how do we actually do that, or instigate that or start that or anything? I don't even know. So I guess that's sort of what I'm wondering, if Caleb or has any comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can provide a response to that. I guess just, and it is appropriate given the timing in that we have, of course, adopted the new city plan, which includes our OCP and a number of other policy documents as of July of this year. And as you can imagine, there is quite a significant implementation of city plan policies that follows. Our next few years here are going to be eaten up, I'm sure, by city plan. And so, yes, one of the items that we do have in the work plan potentially for 2023 would be review and update of our general development permit area design guidelines. As I'm sure all of you know, the current guidelines do date from 1992 and are likely due for an update. So yes, absolutely, that is our 2023 proposal for the work plan. That is subject still for budget approval from council. So we don't know yet if that will be, but we are anticipating that would move forward. And through development permit design guideline review, absolutely there would be opportunity. We expect that the design panel would be included as part of that as one of the key stakeholders on those guidelines.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to know what the city was doing, because I'm finding it harder and harder to work in the city in a progressive way given the guidelines. and I think the city will only benefit from a renewal and revision and look at them.
Yeah, and just maybe just to recall something, I think there was that presentation earlier in the year from to the design panel from the director of our department, Jeremy Holm, is that the design guidelines have moved effectively from our official community plan into our zoning bylaw, where it is just kind of a behind the scenes thing, but they are I guess in effect simpler to amend and to review on perhaps even a more regular basis. But at this stage, we're only talking about doing a review in 2023. So it is something on our radar for sure.
Okay. And okay, I think that was just my main thought, was just how do we have any, if any input, and when, and then I gather, given what you've said, we have to make it a priority for council and mayor as well, whoever those people will be.
Yeah, find out in a couple of days.
Yes. Okay, I don't want to, I don't know if anyone else has any comment about this right now. We can, yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, I would just add, like, obviously, it's something we've always tried to encourage. Maybe it's never been in writing regarding the quality of materials and stuff, but also making sure that applicants consider and embracing new technologies, especially how they relate to green strategies and sustainability as well. And I guess when Caleb and the planning department get together to work with us, get our input on it, a lot of those things can come forward as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't, anyone else, like, I'm kind of letting, any other comment at this point? No, okay. Well, thank you for entertaining my questions. And I'm just motivated to keep making things improve, and as we need them to. Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. So motion to adjourn, I don't know, do we need a motion to? Yes, motion. Thank you, Ken, and a second. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All in favor of adjourning the meeting? I don't know if we do that, but we will stay.